Page.
Cool, cool, cool.
Okay, we are technically live, though we can't see ourselves yet. You can see us.
Let's see. We're live. I see it on your page.
Here we go. Okay, we are. So go ahead and share it, and then we'll begin.
All right. Boom.
Okay, hello. Welcome to episode 4 of the Practical Magic Show. Today we've got Jason Goldberg, one of my favorite human beings in the multiverse.
Are we going to talk about the multiverse? Is that a part of what we're talking about today?
Definitely take it there. We can definitely take it there. Any chance to reference like Iron Man or Doctor Strange, I'm all in. So Jason, you call yourself a pro storyteller, edutainer, and business mentor. But yes. I also really want to point out the unbelievable amounts of what I would consider like outward or material success that you've created, because it represents to me that you're kind of an enigma. So I'll also share, for those of you who don't know Jason, he runs an incredibly successful online school. He's got a #1 best-selling book, an incredible speaking career. He's a teacher at one of the biggest personal development platforms in the world. He hosts A-Fest, which is this awesome, incredible, other, worldly, if you will, personal development event. But why I share that even more specifically is because what I think you represent that is so magical to me is that you embody joy, playfulness, living in the present like nobody that I've ever met. And why I say it's kind of an enigma is because I feel like, either from just my personal mindset or the cultural mindset, you kind of have to pick. You can either be really successful or you can be really happy. I don't know if you can be both, but you certainly can't be happy while you're trying to be successful.
Right.
And so how I see you is that what you teach is that you're not successful in spite of being happy and joyful and not taking yourself seriously. You're successful because of it. So that's the magic trick that I see in you. And the point of the show is it's kind of like, have you ever seen a Penn and Teller magic show?
Of course. I freaking love Penn and Teller.
Okay, right? So they do the whole magic show and then they tell you what they did.
Yeah.
And that's this show, right? So that's how I see you. That's why you're here. Your magic is that you make life unserious.
Thank you.
In order to create more success. So first, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for having me. I'm super, super honored, and I love you. I've adored you for years. So this is like anything that getting a chance to play with you is a hell yes to me anyways. So there could be nobody watching. I would just have the conversation with you anyways. But I love what you said. And I'm always really, I've gotten more quick now at injecting the caveat or the little clause, little asterisk, that I'm all those things except for the times I'm not. Right. And I want to make that really clear, because I think that sometimes when we see people who are anything that we envision that we would like to embody or like to show up that way in the world, we think that it means there is a destination whereby when you reach that level of embodiment or that level of feeling, that's your new set point forever. And maybe for some people it is, and I'm just a weird anomaly, but I have to do the work on myself, because left to my own devices, I actually will take things too seriously. I will take myself way too seriously. And so for me, I am a continual skeptic of the ability to be joyful as a means to be successful. And so I keep testing to make sure that it still works. So I just like to say that up front, that it's work to be done even for me, and that I think it's unrealistic to set up that just happens all the time on autopilot and you never experience the range of emotions that humans are meant to experience. Unless you're a sociopath or heavily medicated, then all bets are off. But for the rest of us, that's my caveat.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because one of my questions for you today was going to be, first, I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that it is so true. When you see somebody who has something that you want, be it a life or a disposition or whatever, it's so easy to assume that person is always that way.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that. So I'll hold my kind of question to take that a little bit deeper.
Okay.
To ask first, and maybe you can actually answer this in that, but why does it work like magic versus the opposite? Why does putting this into practice taking yourself less seriously, infusing more joy and playfulness in. Let's first talk about why, and then we'll talk about how. Well, why does it work so much better than the alternative to not just produce a better experience, but to actually also produce better outcomes?
Yeah, and you nailed it right there. Even at the end, it's the producing the better experience that then leads to producing the better outcomes, right? So it's experience first, not outcome first. It can be outcome first, but then the experience is short lived. If it's an outcome dependent experience, then we're kind of back to where we started. If it's an experience dependent outcome, that we can work with, right? And so I think that the reason that it works is that it is there are different levels of consciousness through which we can see the world, right? You look at, like the work that you and I have both done with Steve Chandler and when he talks about the ladder and all these different things. And when we look at being, low on this ladder of consciousness, the way that I think about it in my head is if I am literally laying face down on a sidewalk and my nose is against the sidewalk, and you come up to me and you go, so Jason, tell me all the possibilities you see for your life. And I would say, cement. And you would say, what else do you see? And I would say, I think that's an ant, but mainly cement. And it's like, no, but think positive. Okay. Still cement. And that's all I can see. When I'm in a more joyful state, then I'm at a higher level of consciousness, and like the aperture on a camera, the perspective, the field of view is increased. And now instead of having myself face down on the cement, I'm in a hot air balloon looking over the city. And I remember the thing I always think about, the thing that always pops in my head about this is, if you remember, did you ever watch the Willy Wonka movie, the original, not the Johnny Depp like travesty of a movie, but like the original Willy Wonka?
Yes, but you're a little bit choppy. Is there potentially, you sound a little bit like a robot, which you might be doing on purpose just to
just to screw with you. Everything looks good on my side. Am I sounding okay now or still robotic?
Still pretty robotic, but we'll just go with it for a moment.
Let's see. Yeah, my internet looks good. Let's do this. All right.
We'll just kind of, this seems better. Say something now.
Testing. Also,
on the audience side, you can let us know if you see, maybe it's just coming through on my side. Sounds good to us. Okay, keep rolling with it.
Okay, Thanks. Cool. All right, we'll go with it. No problem. So Willy Wonka. If you've never seen Willy Wonka, most people I think know the story. But there's a scene at the end of Willy Wonka, and I'm really sorry if I'm spoiling this for you. It's been out for 40 years. But there's a scene at the end when Charlie and Grandpa and Willy Wonka are in the Wonkavator that shoots up through the top of the chocolate factory and is flying over the city. And at one point, Charlie looks down at the city and he says, Grandpa, look, that's our house and that's my school. And it's all this beautiful, it's so beautiful up here. Look how gorgeous everything is. And it's this lovely scene. But at the same time, if you remember in the beginning, when they were actually on the ground in the house, they were poverty stricken. There were 4 people sharing a bed. It was like they were living in squalor. So from the ground level, they're in squalor and poverty, raising above the exact same situation. It's this beautiful thing where you see all these possibilities. So I think the reason why it works is because you just see more opportunity and more possibilities when you're not fixated and laser focused to a fault on this narrow angle of possibilities.
That's first of all such a great analogy, because it really is. It's kind of like that 10,000 foot version. And I know personally that I have experienced this. It's about the experience first and then the outcome. Why is it so difficult, speaking for a friend, to get on board with that? Because even though I know this, and I'll sit down to work on something that doesn't, just naturally make me feel like, I'm in the hot air balloon, and I'll know, it's experience first, and I could have all the tools that you would give me, but why is there still that resistance to that being the case?
I mean, I think it's messaging that's been passed down to us for years. I was watching a little TikTok video the other day because I secretly want to be a 14-year-old little girl. And I remember in the TikTok video where there was somebody who went around and asked a bunch of people, how did you get successful? And every single one of them said, work really hard, work your ass off, outwork everybody. Like that's the language. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with hard work. I actually, truly despise, and I hold a special place in hell for people who say nothing should ever take effort and it should always be in flow and easy. And if there's any resistance whatsoever, that must be the universe telling you it's not for you. I have my gag reflex goes really crazy when I hear that. But I think taken to a fault in either direction. It's not just the like overly flow, everything should be in flow, and taken to the other extreme, it shouldn't be crazy hard work and killing yourself and being obsessive about it. So I think that is the message that we hear growing up from parents, from society, like work your ass off, work hard, outwork everybody else. And so if that is the language and that's the belief and the construct that we attach to, then not only does it seem implausible to do the opposite, it can actually feel irresponsible. Mm-hmm. And so if you're somebody who wants to be seen as a responsible, dependable, hardworking person, and you think that by having some level of lightness in the way you show up in the world, you're being irresponsible, then your identity is threatened. Your identity as a sincere hard worker is threatened. So why would you do that? Why would you subject yourself to that?
That makes a lot of sense. Like that idea that not doing that and not kind of taking on that results-oriented suffering, you're A, not going to get what you want, and B, somehow breaking some like code about how you're supposed to get what you want.
Yeah.
And then there's the other half of it too that I would, at least for me, is this still this really, and would you say this is still the same thing? It's about messaging. It's passed down idea that what you want to feel comes from what you have, right? So would you say that that's the same thing, that like, yeah, sure, I guess it could be fun, but no, really when I'll feel good is when ...
Right. And I think that, I think you nailed it. I think that's the carrot and stick, right? That's the like, it's okay that you feel terrible and that you're suffering now because you'll get a payoff down the line and then it'll make it all worth it. And the challenge, even with that, even if that logic were true, is that you get to the thing and it's all worth it for a little while. And then there's the new thing that you need to go after so that you can feel the thing that you just momentarily felt, but that you can only get if you do all this crazy hard work to get to the next thing that's going to make you feel that thing for a while. And then the cycle starts again. So it looks good on paper for that to happen. And this is not to say you don't feel good as a result of getting a client or getting a new car or doing what. That's great. I'm not saying you should become a Zen Buddhist and disavow any connection to material things. Fine. Enjoy material things. I enjoy material things, but to think that those things alone are going to give you sustained happiness, they won't. Nothing honestly gives you sustained happiness besides sustained work on the experience you're having in life.
That's, could you repeat that?
Hopefully, nothing gives you sustained happiness in life besides the work of sustaining the work of happiness in your experience of life.
That's so good. And what you're making me see, and you can tell me if we have an agreement that Jason is to answer none of the questions, if he sees a better answer to something else. What I think I'm seeing from what you're saying is, we've all had those moments where you just have a good day. You're just feeling particularly good. Maybe you have achieved some outcomes that you're really happy about. In those moments, it's definitely easier to not feel that sense of heaviness and seriousness and pressure.
Yep.
Right? And you see more possibility from those places. It just all feels like, yeah, that's doable. That's possible. This challenge, I've got it. So what I think I'm seeing is that what you're saying is that when you create that experience throughout the process, it's more effective in producing outcomes because of that energy, that when you're in that space, the way that you look at and relate to actions in front of you, the world, the challenges and the problems that you come up against, versus the opposite, where when you're in this it's do or die, I've got to get there, or life isn't worth living kind of mentality, if you bump up against an obstacle, your happiness is basically imprisoned to you getting past it.
Right. 1,000%. No, you nailed it. And there's something in there that's really interesting. And it's actually funny. This really came up a lot during when COVID first really started gripping the world, and people still had work to be done. For the people that were lucky enough to, still have their employment or still working on whatever they were working on, is that it started feeling like what used to take 3 units of energy to complete now took 7 units of energy to complete, right? It's just like everything just felt heavier and harder to deal with. And so the way that I'm looking at this, and this is the first time I'm ever articulating in this way, thanks to that beautiful thing that you just said. So I'm glad I'm answering your question and not something else, is that I think that you can look at happiness, outcome-based happiness as a screwdriver, and experience-based happiness as a power drill, right? They both actually can serve the same purpose, but the amount of energy it takes you to put together a piece of furniture with a hand screwdriver versus a power screwdriver is completely different. And so at the end of my time putting together a piece of furniture after using a hand screwdriver, I probably have some calluses, my forearms are kind of sore, my shoulders are, I'm actually just probably terribly out of shape. But in general, like it's not comfortable. Whereas if I had little power screwdrivers, zip, 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 and I'm done. And I got all my energy, I had all my faculties. And so if there's something else I want to do now in the world, I still have that energy. I haven't leaked all that energy out trying to put something together by hand that I could do with this kind of leverage tool instead.
Yeah, it makes me think of something that Sarah, she was assistant, then she was like CEO of my life. Now she's my strategic business manager and my just literal boss. Like just take
work wife. She's your work wife. It's fine.
She's absolutely my work wife. She'll say to me, it doesn't take you long to create anything at all. You create things in an instant. What takes you forever is realizing that if you would just stop being so serious and start playing, you would create it so much faster. She's like, the thing happens like this. The gap is how long it takes you to realize that you're taking it too seriously before you start.
I am right there with you. That is my same exact, I was going to say struggle, but that doesn't sound playful. That is my same exact curriculum, skill, contract, whatever it is, same exact thing. And it really is the significance that we put on the thing we're creating is always much more of a block to creating that thing than the creation itself. 1,000%.
So here's what I think is also really important about you. And the other thing I think when like you said, when we see someone like you, we think, oh, he's always like that. You know, he's reached a destination that I can't access. The other thing is that I think we do is, well, he's always been like that, so it's just easy for him. And I happen to know that that's not true of you. So I think there's something that I really wanted to make sure we didn't miss today, which is that joy is a skill. Almost. Playfulness is a skill. Being unserious is a skill. So can you talk a little bit about what you were like when you weren't this way and what you're like when you're not this way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my favorite restaurant, no, just kidding. That was me answering, not your question. Okay. So I mean, growing up, I was overweight my entire life. I was like the chunky kid in kindergarten, first grade-ish, got up to 250 pounds by the time I was 15, 332 pounds by the time I was in my 20s, anxious, depressed, suicidal ideation into my mid to late 20s, antidepressants for 15 years. That was my default life, 1,000%. Now, at the same time, I was always the joyful, jokey kind of kid and center of attention and everything else. But that was a way to feel enough, or more enough, I should say, since I felt so unlovable. My mom loves the crap out of me, but anybody outside of my mom or my family, I didn't feel very loved. And so I was always trying to get acknowledgement, validation. And what I realized was that if I could entertain people and make them laugh, then I would feel some kind of love and acceptance. Same thing is how I developed empathy. I wasn't a romantic interest for the girls when I was in school. And so being able to use my skill of empathy or develop my skill of empathy allowed me to feel a deeper connection to them. So I got some level of that connection, even if it wasn't the boyfriend, girlfriend level of connection. So all that to say, I had so many struggles growing up with mental health and just my own physical weight issues and all those things. So that was my default kind of set point for the first 30 years. Like I said, I was still the jokey kid, still center of attention, but that doesn't negate the fact that left to your own devices when things aren't going well, you will, I think it's David Goggins who says, you don't rise to the level of your potential, you sink to the level of your training. Right. And so I had never been trained to navigate my mind. I had never been trained to notice that I am not my thoughts just because there are thoughts in my head. Self as context versus self as content is not something that most of our parents probably ever taught us. And so it only would make sense that if you're raised in an environment and you're taught by family and friends and media and the world that the world is out to get you, that you believe the world is out to get you and you live through that lens. And so that was kind of how I lived primarily for the first 30 years. Then being introduced really first, even though I had read some other personal growth stuff, it was really Steve Chandler who really first had me truly understand the role that I was playing in the world that I was creating, the experience I was creating, and his owner victim distinction. And that was just so life-changing for me reading Reinventing Yourself, is that's where I really started to see that I had some level of choice. Not that I could control my environment or my circumstances, but that there was that I was allowed to release these stories, that it had to be a certain way, or that the way it had been is the way it was always going to be. And that was just the little crack that allowed me to kind of look through and be like, maybe there's a different option. And from there, it was just kind of continual practice. And it is still to this day, continual practice. There is not a day that goes by that I don't have something that I'm navigating, that if I did not have the tools to navigate it, or did not have the willingness to practice those tools, I'd be depressed. Guaranteed 100%.
And I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that level of candor and honesty around this, because I think it's so liberating for someone who is, let's say, in the position that you were in, where you were struggling with mental health and you didn't have this, to hear someone say, and it's still there, right? I remember a mentor of mine once saying, that moment that you're waiting for, where you just feel like you know exactly what you're doing, you've got it all figured out, you put in the work. She was, it's never coming. And I was so relieved. I was honestly so relieved. I was like, because I was really starting to feel like I was not going to get there.
Yeah, it does show up just quick enough for you to realize that it was never there to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, I got it. I finally got. Oh wait, nope, it's gone. It was here and now it's gone. And it's actually funny. It's something that I heard Michael Neal say one time that I loved. He was talking about the principles, but it can totally fit into this as well. He said sometimes it's like pointing at fire with an icicle, right? Mm-hmm. The closer you get to it, the less you have to work with.
Oh, that's so good. The other analogy would be parenting a toddler.
Oh, God. Please tell me all the things about parenting a toddler.
I've got nothing. I know nothing. I wrote a book. One of my last chapters is forget everything I said. I know nothing. Like, because she turned into a toddler, like in the midst of writing the book. And I was like, I am full of shit. I don't know anything.
I love that. And the thing is that, and kids have still been doing fine for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, or however long we've been around this planet. And I actually have heard Sadhguru say before, he travels with his child. I think he has one child. And when this child was very young, he had a rule that nobody was allowed to teach this child anything. The child would pick up what he was meant to pick up by being around everybody, but nobody was allowed to teach the child anything. And I'm like, damn, wow. That's baller. That's baller.
Awesome. Locked in there. We'll see. I'll let you know in like a month how that's going. That person burning down the house. I'm like, I think I took that literally.
That's awesome.
So can you tell me something in the last day to week that you have almost allowed yourself to like get totally depressed about? I don't know if you get that far, but like if you let something really take you down. And use that example to teach a tool that you use that allows you to come back to this place, not taking it so seriously, and sort of liberate that energy and experience to produce or shift your movement toward the outcome.
Absolutely. So I had, what's today, Tuesday? It was yesterday or Sunday, one of the two. I think it was yesterday. I had this real feeling of having like a creative block. And that's threatening. That's threatening to my identity, because I'm somebody that I have been considered, I guess, by others, and I'd probably say it about myself, to be somebody who's kind of a prolific content creator. Just from a quantity perspective, right? I'm able to pump out a lot of stuff. I've done hundreds and hundreds of Facebook Lives, thousands of hours of video and writing, and thousands of pages of all the stuff, right? And so the fact that I was having a creative block and I couldn't come up with something to create in that moment, I created an entire story of like, that's, my creativity's gone. It's never going to come back. What happened to me? What's wrong with me? Starting to go through and say, okay, well, what are all the things that have changed? And there's got to be something here as to why my creativity's gone. All these things and it's adding more and more pressure into my mind, putting more and more significance on the fact that my identity as a content creator is being threatened because I'm having this moment of not being creative or not feeling creative. And so the first awareness there is just to understand the fact that I'm wrapping my entire identity up into one element of who I am as a human. That would be as if to say that I didn't actually exist as a human until the day I first created content, which I know from family pictures, at least, that that's not the case. And that now that I have created content, that can only ever be my identity for the rest of my life, even if I never created a piece of content again. So having that first awareness is great. But what really took the sting away from me from that situation was using a tool that I essentially, they're called prison break questions. They didn't even make it into the book because something I did afterwards. But a prison break question essentially is it's an incisive question that just takes something that's a problem and makes it no longer problematic, right? It doesn't solve the problem, because if the problem's not actually a problem, then there's nothing to solve. And so the PBQ that I used, and the format for the question is, if I knew, what would I do, right? Very, very simple. If I knew, what would I do? And then you fill in the blanks of things in between there. And so for me, what I realized was that in that moment, I was feeling a sense of permanence of that feeling. And that's what was scary to me. It wasn't scary that it was there. It was scary that I thought it wasn't going to leave, right? That was my actual fear. Because if I knew, well, let's just get into this. So that was my fear. It was going to stay around forever. So the PBQ became, and I'm beating myself up and I'm being hard on myself and I'm trying to force myself to create, which is definitely not helping. And so the PBQ that I came up with in that moment was, if I knew this feeling of being blocked creatively, whatever it is, if I knew this feeling was going to magically disappear in the next 10 minutes, right? Like it's going to be here for 10 minutes, and at 10 minutes and 1 second without me doing anything, it's going to disappear. If I knew it was going to be here for exactly 10 minutes, how would I treat myself for the next 10 minutes? That was it. That was the question. And the answer that came up for me was gentleness, compassion, not being so effing hard on myself, not forcing myself to try to create. It's like, dude, just wait 10 minutes. It's going to be gone anyways. Just like watch TV, go meditate, go for a walk, do whatever. Because no matter if I swing a stick at the problem or not, in 10 minutes, it's going to be gone. So I can either approach the next 10 minutes with anxiety and stress and fear, or I can approach it with openness and joy and peace. And so when I did that, it's not that it went away immediately, but immediately the heaviness of it started to lift. And within 10 or 15 minutes, I still didn't have any new ideas. And it just wasn't a problem anymore that I didn't have any new ideas.
I think there's two really important elements of that I'm picking up. And one is the idea that it's a moment.
Yeah.
Right? You were making it this whole identity crisis, but it's a moment in time. Yeah. And if I were to imagine the many, many times that I have experienced overt seriousness, it's that whatever is happening feels like it's never going to not happen.
Right.
So that was sort of the first thing. The second thing that I imagine probably happens more quickly with practice, but could be a barrier to somebody who is just kind of navigating this for the first time, is a willingness to slow down long enough to actually answer that question. Because I sort of imagine like we all have to sort of like two brains, right? We have like our reactive brain and our brain that's actually capable of thinking. And in a moment like that, where you're feeling that, pressure and that heaviness and that disappointment with yourself, it would be really easy to say, well, if I knew that this was only going to last 10 minutes and it was going to go away anyway, how would I treat myself? My reactive brain would be like, you're an idiot. This isn't going to last 10 minutes. And in these, it would be really easy to answer that question from the same part of your brain that's freaking out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. And this is why this gets super meta, but if you can look at the meta, even of that. So, and it was funny, I did a Facebook Live about this not too long ago, where one day I had done a Facebook Live where I was saying, the quickest way to, not that you should do this to alleviate your heavy emotions or your uncomfortable emotions, but the quickest way to have them kind of go away on their own is to really be okay with the fact they're there, just to not mind. Right? Like it's a creaky fan or it's a whatever. It's like, yeah, it's kind of annoying, but whatever. I'm allowing it to be without being a nuisance, right? It can be present without being a relevant part of my experience. And so then inevitably some people were like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's a great tool. I'm going to use it. Some other people said, I'm trying that right now in the moment and it's not working. And I was like, okay, that's a fair point. So I thought about it a little more. And then I realized it would be like if you are sitting there and you really want to do jumping jacks and you can't do jumping jacks for whatever reason. And I'm telling you, just be okay with the fact that you can't do jumping jacks. And you go, well, I can't because I'm pissed off that I can't do jumping jacks. But then you look down and you realize you have a broken leg, like your leg is in a cast. And you go, oh, of course I can't do jumping jacks. I have a broken leg right now. So the reason I share that is because you can get into the meta state of, oh, of course this tool isn't working right now. I'm really low. Okay, I'm just feeling really low right now. So maybe there's no tool to use right now. Maybe the tool is no tool, right? Maybe the tool is to realize I'm in a really low mood and nothing's supposed to work when I'm in a really low mood. That's what a low mood's for. So if I just chill out for a little while and ask the question again later, like the magic 8-ball, right? It says ask again later. It's a very intelligent piece of technology. Sometimes asking yourself the question in this moment is not the right time. Let yourself kind of sober up a little bit, conscious wise, and then ask yourself the question again.
That's really funny that you said that, because I'm big into like tarot cards, and I've got like all kinds of decks. Actually, I have an Osho deck because of you.
Oh, nice. Love Osho.
So the card that I pulled earlier was, because I was definitely taking myself way too seriously earlier today. So I'm like, oh, I'll pull a card. And it literally was like, now's not a good time. I was like, I've never fucking seen this. Like, you're just fun right now. And I like actually reshuffled the deck and pulled the same card again. It was like, you weren't listening, or
that is so well, and and that's why I wrote about in Prison Break. I have that chapter called "Your Intuition is Drunk," which is my favorite chapter in the book. Not because I think I wrote it really well, but because it's the one that I need to go back and revisit so much. And it's that exact same thing. Like, you can't force your consciousness, at least in my experience, you can't force your consciousness to immediately increase any more than you can force a drunk person to be sober immediately. It takes time. It takes like gentleness. It takes putting down the shaken up snow globe and letting the snow settle on its own, and not thinking it's your responsibility to grab every piece of snow and put it back on the ground.
I really like that that element to this, because you have so many tools that are so effective, but I think this extra layer into those tools of like, it might not work right away. It takes a little time. It takes patience, slowing down, because all of that in and of itself is just allowing yourself to just shift your energy. And then the tool is even more effective. So I really love that.
Exactly. Yep. You nailed it.
So I have one more question, and it's something that you talked about in I think it was your most recent podcast episode. If you haven't checked out Jason's podcast, it's like, don't listen to very many podcasts. It's Jason Goldberg is ruining podcasting. He is ruining podcasting.
This literally just came in the mail today from my production team that does the podcast. So nobody's seen it until just this moment.
It's so good. It's so good. I send it to people all the time. I actually don't really listen to podcasts, but I always listen to yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Because it's so practical and so useful. But something that you talked about in your most recent podcast episode on bringing more magic into your life was the distinction between practically magic and practically tragic, which is so funny. So I wondered, because I think that really highlights the difference between how you create magic in your world. So would you mind just speaking to that to kind of close us out?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I love that the theme of your show is around magic. It's perfect timing for that episode to come out. So the practical magic side, besides being a really lovely young adult movie, the thing about practical magic to me is that it is a balancing mix of creating space in your world for things to occur, right? And being the person who immerses themselves in their craft. So it's not to the full one side of like, I'm going to sit on my couch and manifest. And it's not on the other full side of like, go, do, everything is on you. You got to make it all happen. It's this place in the middle where I want to be practicing magic in the way that James Altucher talks about in his quote, where he says, to the outside world, immersion is the same as magic, right? Immersing yourself in your craft. I want to be immersing myself in my craft. I want to be really sincere and devoted and attentive to the work that I'm doing. But I also want to leave space for other things to be able to occur. And what I talk about in the podcast is, if you plant seeds too close together in the ground, they will disease and decay and they won't grow. Even if you have all the best intentions of the world, you're doing all the best things. If you plant them too close together and there's not enough space, they just won't grow. And the same thing happens for us. Our ideas won't grow, our enthusiasm won't grow. And in fact, it'll decay, it'll dis-ease in our life. It'll show up as dis-ease in our life. So practical magic is about saying, how do I balance being fully immersed in my craft, showing up, being sincerely devoted to the work at hand, while also leaving space for this otherworldly magic kind of stuff to appear. And that's, to me, that's the way it works really well or most effectively. The other side of it, practically tragic, is kind of the flip side of that is maybe you're you're doing all the things, like you actually are putting in the work and doing all the things for immersion, but because there's no space, you're spinning your wheels constantly, and you want something new to happen. You're like, oh man, I really wish some new inspiration would come through, right? Or I feel like I'm not contributing to my highest level, and I feel like there's a next level of growth for me, but I can't do anything about that because I'm so packed. My schedule is so packed. My mind is so packed. Everything's so packed. So I need to create space up here, more so up here than out here, to be honest. You can still do a lot of things in the world of form. It's between the ears where it gets a little clogged up. So that shift from practically tragic to practical magic, a big part of that is just creating more space in your inner world and your outer world.
What I hear, right or wrong, is, stop trying to control everything also. Yep. Because a lot of the time when we're in that space of go, I can't, it's because if I stop, the world will certainly spin off its axis and here we go, spin back out into the multiverse. Right. You got it back. In comedy, that's called a callback.
Yes.
The other thing that I think you mentioned that's so important about that is space up here, which I think that the majority of people, their experience of space is something that numbs them out. Like binge watching Netflix isn't necessarily space. It's not necessarily not space, but for most people, I don't think the kind of space you're talking about is grind, and then binge drink on the weekends, or grind, and go shut off. So can you just kind of talk a tiny bit about the difference between space and shutting off?
Yeah, I prefer meth over alcohol. That's just me. I don't, whatever your vice is, it's fine. Okay. So yeah, that's a really good point. So for me, it's about how do I recapture the leaked energy that's going towards things that do not enhance the connection I feel to the presence of being alive. Right? There are things that diminish my capacity to feel connected to the experience of being alive. And there are things that enhance my experience of the connection of being alive. And so for me, creating space is, Marie Kondoing my mind and figuring out what are the things that actually have me feel the way I want to feel. What are the things that make me feel more like life and less like a mechanical creature pretending to be alive? And what are the things that take me completely away from that? And anything that takes me away from that, anything that does not enhance my connection to the presence of being alive, then I want to understand that I'm allowed to release that. And it's not irresponsible, and it doesn't say anything about me, and I'm not releasing my identity, and it's not going to make my mother or society upset. And if it does, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it is clearing out the cobwebs of the things that diminish my experience of life to leave open space for the things that do enhance my experience of life to grow.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. So leaving space for the things that do enhance your connection to life to grow. That's creating space.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And I mean, if you're in LA, you smoke a little weed, that's fine too. But for the most part, we want to work on your mindset.
Okay, well, that's perfect. You have permission to smoke weed, so that looks like a great place to.
I mean, you live in Colorado. They've already decriminalized psilocybin. I mean, I got nothing on you.
That's right. I feel like if this keeps rolling, we'll be on a whole nother conversation.
Telling you, the multiverse. I'm an investor in a company it's called the Multiverse, and they're all about functional mushrooms.
Okay, sign me up. So that's amazing. Well, this is so good. This is such incredible wisdom, and it's so absolutely necessary for me. I also selfishly love to be around you because I feel like without using any of your tools, I'm taking everything less seriously. Oh. So you have an incredible book called Prison Break. So incredible. Tell them where they can find it. Any other ways that they should engage with you aside from your incredible book, your amazing podcast?
Yeah, I mean, Prison Break you can find at most garage sales in rural America. The dog-eared pages and some dog bites out of the book, most likely. No, you can find it on Amazon, Prison Break, and it's not the DVD of the TV show, and it has nothing to do with the TV show. So look up Prison Break book, or you can go to thejasongoldberg.com/Prison Break. It'll take you to that. The podcast, thejasongoldberg.com/podcast, and follow me on Instagram. I'm at the Jason Goldberg because I needed to be as pretentious as I possibly could be. Jason Goldberg was taken, so I got the Jason Goldberg, and I hang out there and share a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah, and your free content is 10 times better than most people's paid content. So absolutely, Just a fun fact, my copy of your book actually does have dog bites. So I might be signing on to get a new one.
You are not the first. I have had clients send me pictures of their dogs eating my book. And my first thought is, get the book out of its, why are you taking a picture? Get the book out of its mouth. But it's fine. I won't take it seriously.
If this episode served you, share it with someone who needs it, someone who's taking themselves too seriously, with a light touch, of course. And thank you, Jason, so much for being here. I adore you. Thank you so, so much.
I love you, Vanessa. Thanks for having me here.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.